Hi, I'm Jackie Tantillo, and this is Should Have Listened to My Mother. I always like starting off my show thanking all my listeners and all the support that I get for Should Have Listened to My Mother. I wouldn't be doing this for not people reaching out to me and wanting to share, whether it's dirty laundry or God knows what, the relationship with her mom. But it's just such a pleasure to do this and reach people all over the world. And we're fortunate to have people listening all over the world. And I wanted to shout out, of course, to people in California and the Ventura area that listen on KPPQ-LP in Ventura at 104.1 FM. And you can also stream it on the MyTuner app and at capsmedia.org/radio. My guest is a wonderful storyteller, screenwriter, filmmaker, director, and owner of Odd Lot Improv and Savannah Shakes Shakespeare Theater Company. Some of his favorite genres include paranormal and ghost stories. One of Chris's mottos is don't ever do a job that you don't like. He lived in Germany with his family when younger and now resides in beautiful Savannah, Georgia. Chris Soucy, it's a pleasure to have you on Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Now, you wrote to me saying you have a complicated relationship with your mother. Well, I guess we're going to find out. You are the son of...
Yoon-cha Soucy. My mom she's Korean born. Her maiden name was Cho. So in Korea, it would be Cho Yoon-cha because the family name comes first. And she was every bit, the immigrant experience. She married my father. And so America was kind of this, unknown thing that she was going to be facing down.
When you say Korea, North Korea, South Korea?
South Korea, yes. She's from Seoul. She's from Seoul, Korea, South Korea. And I think that the generation of my father, military-wise, there were a lot of Korean brides. There were a lot of soldiers who married Korean women. And so, like all my life, there had been this sort of group of Korean military wives that kind of clustered together, and my mom being one of them. And so there was an interesting thing about like Korean culture around us. But surprisingly, my mom did not enforce a lot of Korean culture on us. She didn't make it like a regimen for us. It was very loosey-goosey.
And how old was your mom when she met your father?
So my mom was like 21 when she met my father, 21 in that range. There's been speculation as to like age and when they got married, because there are two wedding certificates and so like my sister discovered a wedding certificate and it was like by the math, she was absolutely consumed with the idea that she was actually conceived out of wedlock. But then my parents were like, oh, well, no, because we had to get married first in country and then use that certificate to get married according to military. So you're looking at the military wedding certificate and not the official's wedding certificate.
Right. And was her family involved in this at all? Or this wasn't any kind of arranged thing that you need to find an American or they fell in love?
My favorite story is first off, my mom, her family was very thrown to the wind during the Korean War. And there was so my mom ended up like living in the mountains with like Buddhist monks and her sister came looking for her, found her, brought her back to just outside of a military base there in Korea, and they opened like a little grocery shop. And the grocery shop was where the GIs would, when they're not on base, they would get their various sundry products. And my mom, even still is gorgeous. So, imagining this very beautiful woman serving up GIs, she could have had any of them. And And my dad, of course, won her over with his charm.
Working from the PX. Oh my God.
Right, exactly.
He probably went out of his way to go get something that he didn't really need just to see her.
Exactly. And that was another thing was, for anyone who's ever served in the military, on base, things that you can get on base seem limited and are also not very creative. But the second you step off base, you've got this entire world, all these wonderful cultural things. And so, people cooking right in the window, and you're going up to the window, and sure enough, the quickest way to a man's heart is his tummy.
Are your parents still with us?
Oh, yes, both of them. And the wonder of the story is growing up, me, my sister, my parents, we understood that life was going to just throw us in every possible direction. We did not really expect to see each other all that much once, we had graduated and gone out into the world. But I myself joined the Army, and my sister kind of like planted roots here in the Southeast because we were stationed here when we graduated high school. And so she was like, I'm not moving again. And me and my dad were like, goodbye. And we just kind of scattered. But over time, we found ourselves living like within blocks of each other. And we have, breakfast every Saturday, and we hang out, and we see each other, which was not expected at all, because, military life makes you very aware of being temporary and making the most out of temporary situations. So I've been living in Savannah for 30 years, kind of thinking I was temporarily here.
Yeah, right. When's my next, what do you call it when you're transferred in the military? Your next...
station,
right.
Duty assignment. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, absolutely. We I still have a box that I don't unpack. And currently I've lived in the house that I own for 6 years, and there's still a box that I have yet to unpack because I have that, well, we're going to move again, aren't we? I mean, it's coming any day now.
It's like waiting for the other shoe to drop. So where were you born? Were you born on a military base?
I was born on a military base in Shirley, Massachusetts, in Fort Devens, Massachusetts. But we were whisked to Korea before I was even 1 year old. And my sister, who is 2 years older than me, was born in Korea. And so, and then like my earliest memories are of Germany. We lived in Germany when I was very young. And then we moved to Italy and Washington, D.C. and bounced around. Then we ended up in Hinesville, Georgia, which was a culture shock.
I bet. And we hear all the stories of there's so many wonderful aspects of this experience, but it's also very hard and challenging, especially for young kids because you're picking up and moving.
Yes, it's all about adaptability. And, me and my sister were as different as possible because my sister grew very attached. And whenever we moved, it was very hard on her. And I grew very aloof. And whenever we moved, I was like, on to the next. So we definitely had different attitudes about how these moves were treating us.
Wow. Talk about adaptability, how that comes in handy. That's probably why you love improv so much.
Absolutely. My whole life is one big improv game.
Woo! Next.
Exactly.
Yes, so what was it like for your mom? You're moving around all the time. Did she ever want to stay in Korea, you think?
So, it's very interesting because I think she had sort of this, homesickness that permeates everything that we do. Is we all get homesick for some place. There's some place that we register as the home. And for like me and my sister, we never really had that sensation of a place as home. It actually became the four of us, mom, dad, me, and her. That symbolized home more than anything could, because we didn't have location for it. But my mom, growing up all in one place, and my dad too. My dad actually grew up in Newington, Connecticut. And we used to go to his childhood home when we would visit my grandparents. So it's fascinating because I always think of myself as like my home is in New England. I was born in Massachusetts and my grandparents were from Newington. But, the grand total of my life, I haven't even spent a single % of my life in that area. So it's interesting because I think when you're transient, you fixate on, you choose the thing that you fix on. But my mom, of course, always had Korea sort of looming large, but she carried it in her heart. When I say that she didn't pass it on to us, it's interesting. The truth was, she was learning at the same time we were. We were growing up, and she was growing into an American. She was a lot of it, what she went through kind of echoed with us. So we were growing up, and she was learning too. She was going to school, and she was trying to learn how to, navigate being on American bases, being an American citizen. And one day, my sister, when she was 4 or 5 years old, came home crying because we spoke Korean in the house, and my sister would speak Korean to her dolls, and the kids made fun of her, saying that it wasn't a real language, and they made fun of her, and they're very mean to her. And so my sister told my mom never to speak Korean to her again.
Oh, no.
And my mom didn't.
No.
Yes. And the impact, the casual blow is terrible, but like it really sinks deep when you think of somebody giving up their everything to appease, this crying child, to say, I never want you to feel this way. And plus my mom was trying to learn English, and it wasn't always easy because she always had us to kind of go back and forth with. So, it doubled her efforts on learning how to speak English, and we spoke English in the house. And when I think of what was lost, my heart just hurts. But when I think of that sacrifice, I'm like, that's a lot of love, to spare your child ridicule.
Right. Your mom is trying to absorb the American culture, become an American, and yet hang on to the last little bit that she's got. So did she speak to you in Korean, or she just stopped speaking?
No. The household, we stopped speaking Korean. And my father's a polyglot. He picks up languages at the drop of a hat. He speaks like 6 languages. And it's fascinating because growing up, my sister and I both have a knack for language, but we also have a knack for forgetting language. Like, you learn it very quickly, but when you don't use it, it's gone. I know that we were fluent in German. We lived there for 5 years when I was very young. And today I can pick out what people are saying in German. And if I'm reading it, I feel confident I understand mainly what's happening, but I do feel that pang of, why didn't I keep up with this? This is a fascinating, skill to have, but because I didn't use it regularly, it never occurred to me that I should, keep working on language.
Right. Unfortunate that your mom could have gone to the school and explained, and introduced these kids to Korean, right?
Oh, yeah.
In hindsight, how the whole thing could have been turned around.
And because I think too, there's a notion of not understanding a society as a whole. You're a foreigner and you find out that is not accepted in the social circle that you're in. It's very difficult to weigh whether that's correct or not. You don't want to show up and be like, this is the way it's supposed to be, and have people say, actually, no, according to the, hidden bylaws of American society, that is not the way it is. So I think that there's a lot of anxiety. I mean, and she was young, she wasn't even out of her 20s at this point. When I think of, how easily swayed I was, or how, basically ignorant I was in my 20s. I'm like, well, yeah, if somebody tells me something contrary to what I understand, I don't immediately say that's wrong. I say, oh, maybe I'm in an area I don't understand.
Right.
She's insanely strong, and she definitely enforces, all these things, which this is where the complicated nature of our relationship was. My mom was a great dreamer, and she dreamed of such wonderful things, and she was always espousing the value of dreaming and the value of pursuing dreams and chasing dreams and never letting yourself, be satisfied by anything less than what you truly want. And this was ingrained in both my sister and I. We were just like growing up with this kind of, my mom was this crusader, this champion of, follow that dream, go to that dream, what is it you really love? Because if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. That whole thing, that was her vibe. But as we got closer to graduating high school, it was like, do whatever you want except that. Don't do that. No, that is not going to make you money. You're not going to make a living there. What are you, crazy? When I said do whatever you want, I meant be a doctor, a lawyer. You can be president of the United States. You cannot be an improv comedian. You can't be, an actor. That's not the way to go.
How funny! Well, she has a sense of humor, perhaps too. Not really.
Well, and it was just fascinating because I think in her belief structure, what you would want is to be the quote unquote success. And there were things that seemed out of reach that would spell success. Be a lawyer, that's successful. Be, a doctor, that's successful. And so when we were getting our successes in different fields, because my sister actually succumbed to it. She actually went to college to become a psychiatrist. But in her junior year of college, she decided to become an actress. I had always been a theater rat. I was always, in shows. I was always trying to. And my sister was the responsible one, and I was the screw up. Yeah. So
the firstborn.
Right. Yeah. My sister carried the banner, and I just kind of stood in her shadow and was like, yeah, you go, you succeed. I'm just going to, do what I like and have a good time. But it turns out that, we were exposed to amazing art all around the world. My mom was very dedicated to the idea that if we lived in a country, we should see as much of the country. We should do as much in the country. And thankfully, the government, the United States Army, they thought that was true too. The Department of Defense, Child Services, the school systems and everything, they would put us out into museums and let us see these shows and let us take classes out, and they called it the economy, out in the actual country, and that gave us such a wide palette to paint the picture of our lives. And then when we were in college, we started to really view the rest of our lives, and was like, well, is there a job out there that ticks all these boxes in our heart, that makes it feel like we should and could be happy? And we found that those careers were very
inside the box.
Yeah, it was so hard for us to imagine a life of going to the same place and doing the same thing.
Which is not to say that that's not a bad thing, right?
No.
We need lawyers, and we need.
I am in awe
business people.
I'm in awe of anyone who has a friend from like elementary school. I'm in awe of anyone who went, through this regimented life that was like, oh, how neat that you have all these people and these resources in this place. How amazing that your life lined up in such a way that you could see a path. With us, we were always carrying the path with us. So we always felt like we were visiting. And that made us live in these pockets, these momentary, and that's kind of what theater is. It's living in the production. And then when the production's over, you go to the next production. And it becomes this kind of concept where our lives are not this steady stream, but these bursts of
increments, maybe.
They're increments, right? Absolutely. And so, and this, of course, was, and my mom being, she's artsy enough, but man, this was not in her wheelhouse of of the way to live.
Was this her dream to come to America, find a soldier and come? Is that?
I don't think so. We talked about it a couple of times, and my mom would never say one way or another that she sat, in Korea going, oh, one day I'll live in America. But I do think there was that romanticized version of America that she was introduced to through media. She was she was very close to naming me George Custer, Soucy. And I was like, my God, would that have been terrible? Why would you name me after George Custer? And she's like, because Errol Flynn played him in a movie, and he was so handsome. You know, he was so good looking. And, you know, she just saw him, this very handsome man. And she's like, who's that? And I was like, oh, well, that's Custer. That's George Armstrong Custer. And she's like, oh, okay. So there's this like romanticized version of America. So I don't think she certainly didn't shy away from it. It seemed to be a point of friction among her siblings. You know, I don't think her siblings were too happy with her marrying an American, and certainly not, you know, traipsing around the world. I want to say that she didn't see her sister for close to 30 years.
Wow. She eventually went back.
She did eventually go back. And I have been like conspiring to go back because I have the faintest memories of Korea. Because I, you know, I don't have like solid memories. But when I'd ask questions like, hey, did we ever own a dog that had one white eye? And they're like, oh, yeah, that was our dog in Korea. And I was like, that's so weird that I can remember this dog. And the reason I remembered it was its head was as big as I was. So, like, you know, in my memory, I'm like, you know, the size I am now. And there's a dog whose head is the size of me. And I'm like, when was that? What was that? Was that a nightmare? Or was I?
Do you remember the dog's name?
Sarge. I don't. I didn't remember that his name was Sarge. In conversation, it was like, oh yeah, that was Sarge. And my favorite story about Sarge was, I think my mom picked this dog out, and he's just like, he was kind of like a German Shepherd mix, and he was a nightmare of a dog. Apparently, he was like a great guard dog, but the dog hated my dad.
Oh, not good.
And so it lived in the front yard, and there's like a little thing from the front gate to the front door where my dad would have to run to the house, because Sarge would chase him, and he would do this every day. And then apparently one day, we were robbed, and someone stole Sarge. Someone stole the dog, stole his doghouse, his dog food bowls, everything. And I'm like, someone stole the dog. Okay, sure.
Like that going to the farm.
Right, exactly.
It's like the farm.
I think somebody with who Sarge tolerated better was given a new dog.
Oh my gosh! All right, so your mom, so she finally goes back. Did any of her family ever come to America?
Interestingly enough, my parents they invited a cousin of mine, and his name was Pumjin. I'm like, is that right? I may be mispronouncing it. But my cousin came to America to live for like 3 months and lived with my parents. And this was after my mom had gone and reconciled. And reconciled is a heavy word. Just reconnected with her family. And Pumpson was wanted to come to America. And so my family hosted him. And he was a really interesting guy. He was like a computer fanatic, and he had served in the Korean military, and so it was interesting because we felt so removed from our Korean family. You know, we feel like satellites to it.
Sure.
One of the most interesting things was when my mom went back to Korea, and this was, you know, me and my sister, full adults. One of my mom's great regrets was that her house caught on fire when they were very young. And the only pictures of her mother and her family engulfed in flame. And I'll never forget it. I was like 12 years old, and my mom tells me that she's having a hard time remembering what her mother looked like, because her mother died when she was very young, and she couldn't remember. You know, she had an idea, she had a sensation about it. And I remember that striking me as incredibly tragic. And a lot of that has to do with, they were a poor family. There was no cameras. They didn't have like photo albums and pictures. And so when my mom went to Korea, her sister goes and gets this one photograph of their mother. And it turns out that it survived the fire. But the most amazing thing about the story was apparently her mother was sick. And there was a guy who used to travel from town to town with a camera on his shoulder. And she spent all day one day tracking down this guy so she could get a picture of herself for her family. And it was only like a matter of weeks before she died. And it was this incredible thing because me and my sister had never seen our grandmother. And we had kind of given up on the idea that we ever would. And there was this picture, this amazing photograph of this woman. And she was dressed in, kind of ceremonial looking dress. It was amazing. It was breathtaking because the resolve of it, and then to find out that it survived the fire, and then to know that it had to go through a restoration process, and then here it was. And so sitting on my mother's bookcase is this wonderful portrait of her mother.
That must have been bring a lot of peace to your mom.
It did, and it was like a missing piece of our family puzzle in a lot of ways.
Did your dad ever meet her parents?
No. Both my mom's parents were gone before my dad showed up. But my dad talks about my mom's mom a lot because my dad has like rules for being a Korean. And so if you break one of the rules, then you're disappointing Grandma Cho. So like she's still with you. Yeah. Oh yeah. If most recently my rice cooker broke, and I was like, my rice cooker broke. And so my dad's like, well, did you get another one? I was like, not yet. And it's like, so you don't have a rice cooker in your house? Grandma Cho would be so disappointed in you.
But how great is that?
Yeah. No. Still present in our life.
Oh, my goodness. So we just have a couple minutes left, Chris. Did you want to talk about any current projects or shows that you're working on currently?
So coming out of the pandemic, we've been on pause. So there's, we haven't been able to, like my improv company, we had to actually close our physical theater. The Shakespeare company probably won't be coming back until 2023. So right now I do have a podcast I've been working on called The Most Haunted City on Earth. So if you go looking for the most haunted city on Earth, we are telling the ghost stories around Savannah, Georgia. Savannah, Georgia is a very celebrated ghost town, lots of ghosts. So we sit around and we just talk, ghost shop as it were. And you can find it on any platform. You should be able to find it on any platform. It's definitely on Spotify. Great. The Most Haunted City on Earth. Wow, that's a big title. Yeah, I know. And I actually also have a personal podcast that I just launched called My Favorite Ghost Story. And my favorite ghost story is literally me telling my favorite ghost stories. Everything from fiction to my own experiences. I just find ghost stories endlessly fascinating. And Savannah is such a great city, town to let your imagination go wild. So that's pretty fun. Good for you. My guest, Chris Soucy. Thank you again for sharing these stories of your mom. There's so much richness there. Yeah, everybody's relationship with their mother is so integral to who they are, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. Absolutely. And please say hi to Yun Cha. I will indeed. And it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me on Should Have Listened to My Mother. Thank you very much.